right, so 4.4 notes are super similar to what we've been doing throughout chapter 4. But before, we were finding our trig functions on the unit circle. Now we're going to move off of the unit circle and just in a regular coordinate plane. We'll have an x and a y axis. But before, our radius, since we were on the unit circle, the radius was always 1. Now we're going to have a different value for our radius, so it changes our trig functions a little bit. So before, we had that sine of theta was y, or just y over 1, because we were on the unit circle. Now that our radius is not 1, it's going to be y over r. So the sine is going to change just a little bit. It's still the y value, but instead now it's y over r. Cosine, still x, but it's now x over r. Tangent and cotangent stayed the same. They're still x, y over x is tangent, and x over y is cotangent. But the cosecant, which is the reciprocal of sine, is going to flip now to r over y, and cosine and secant go together, so secant's going to be r over x. Now, we're going to be given a point, which is going to be our x and our y, but we can still kind of think about it as a triangle. So we can draw our triangle by dropping our point towards the x-axis. We always drop it towards the horizontal axis here. So we've got our right triangle. All right, so we can form our triangle. Theta always comes from the center. So if this is our triangle here, theta is going to come from the center, so kind of about the origin. I'm going to make a note of that. Theta comes from the center. And r is always positive. Now there's a couple different ways that we can think about finding our trig functions here. We can use our x, y, and r and follow the formulas here, but we can also think about it like a triangle. My x goes along the x-axis, so this would be our x side here. The y goes up and down, so we've got our y side, and then the radius is our hypotenuse, so this would be r. Now if I found the sine of theta, sine is what over what in terms of SOHCAHTOA? It would be opposite over hypotenuse, which is y over r. So it's the same thing. Our y would be opposite of theta, x is adjacent, and r is our hypotenuse. So you can think about it either way. You can think about it in terms of SOHCAHTOA, or you can think about it in terms of x, y, and r. So they still mean the same thing, but it only works out the same way if you draw your triangle correctly. So you always drop the third side of the triangle towards the x-axis, and theta always comes from the center here. So theta is always going to be the center angle. So sine, you can think about it as y over r, or it's the same as opposite over hypotenuse. So looking at example 1, it says let negative 3, 4 be a point on the terminal side of theta. Find sine, cosine, and tangent of theta. So if we want, we could draw our triangle here. I'm going to drop my third side towards the x-axis. So we've got our right angle here. Theta comes from the center angle, so this would be our theta. Our x value is negative 3, so we go along the x-axis, negative 3. Our y value is the height of our triangle here, which is 4. How would we find r? Pythagorean theorem, perfect. So we have negative 3 squared plus 4 squared equals r squared. Be careful when you're doing the math here. Negative 3 squared, the negative gets squared too, so it would be positive 9. A common mistake that people will make is that they'll leave the negative. It always gets squared, so it'll always turn positive. So 9 plus 16 equals r squared. What's 9 plus 16? 25 equals r squared. Take the square root, so r equals what? 5. Perfect. So our radius is 5. Is our radius going to be positive or negative 5? Positive. Why do we know that it's positive? It's always positive. So radius is always going to be positive. X or Y, depending on where your point is, they could be both negative. One could be negative. Just check the signs depending on the point. But R is always positive. So let's find our trig functions. We'll find all 6 of them here. So sine of theta, cosine theta, tangent theta, and cosecant theta, secant theta, cotangent theta. So in terms of x, y, and r, sine is what over what? Y over r, which would be 4 over 5, perfect. Cosine is x over r, so what would our cosine be? Negative 3 over 5, perfect. And tangent is y over x, awesome, negative 4 over 3. Now when we find our reciprocal functions, we're just going to flip it. So cosecant is r over y, or 5 over 4. Secant's the reciprocal of cosine, so 5 over negative 3. And then cotangent's the reciprocal of tangent, so it'd be negative 3 over 4. So these are 6 trig functions. Now again, you can think about it in terms of SOHCAHTOA. 4 is going to be our opposite, 5 is our hypotenuse, and negative 3 is adjacent. You'll get the same answers if you do SOHCAHTOA. Same thing. Just make sure you draw the triangle correctly. Next page is the same thing, so I'm going to skip it. Let's go to example 2. So here it doesn't give us the graph, but we're going to do the same thing. It says the point on the terminal side of an angle in standard position. The point is on the terminal side of the angle in standard position. Determine the exact values of the 6 trig functions of the angle. So given our point, negative 4, 7, this is going to be our x and our y. How do we find r? A squared plus b squared, our Pythagorean theorem. So negative 4 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared, or I'll call it r squared. Negative 4 squared is what? 16. 7 squared? 49 equals r squared. 16 plus 49? 65 equals r squared. Take the square root. So r would be the square root of 65. Is it positive or negative? Positive, because r is always positive. Can we simplify the square root of 65? No. Our 2 factors would be 5 and 13. We don't have any pairs, so it doesn't simplify. Now that we have our x, y, and r, we can find all of our trig functions. Let's start with sine, cosine, and tangent. We'll find our reciprocal functions, cosecant, secant, cotangent. So sine, in terms of x, y, and r, is what over what? Y over r. So that would be 7 over square root 65. Can we leave our answer like this? No, we have to rationalize. So we get 7 square root 65 over 65. Cosine is what over what? X over r. So that would be negative 4 over square root 65. Again, we have to rationalize. So we get negative 4 square root 65 over 65. And then tangent is what over what? Y over x. So our y is 7 over x is negative 4. Let's find our reciprocal functions now. So for cosecant, I'm going to flip the sign, but before I rationalize. That way I don't have to rationalize again. So we'd get square root 65 over 7. Secant, we flip cosine, but before we rationalize, so square root 65 over negative 4. And cotangent, we flip tangent, so negative 4 over 7. If it helps you, you can always draw it here. The point negative 4, 7, we'd go to the left to negative 4 and up 7. So we'd have our point there. We form our triangle by dropping it down to the x-axis, and our theta always comes from the center. So our theta would be here. We've got -4 and 7. We found our hypotenuse, which was square root 65. If you draw your triangle correctly, you can always do it in terms of SOHCAHTOA. Sine would be opposite over hypotenuse. So you'd get the same thing. So you can always draw it if you like to see it, if you're more of a visual person. But you don't have to. You can find the answer without drawing it. So here we're going to talk about the signs of trig functions. So depending on which quadrant we're in, there's a pattern with our signs of the trig functions. So I'm going to rewrite this here. In the first quadrant, all of our trig functions are positive. In quadrant 2, just sine and its reciprocal are positive. In quadrant 3, just tangent and its reciprocal are positive. And then in quadrant 4, only cosine and its reciprocal are positive. So one way to remember this is all students take calculus. So starting in the first quadrant, all are positive, then students take calculus. So the acronym stands for what's positive in each quadrant. So knowing this is a good way to check your work. You can always check the signs of your answers at the end of the question by knowing which quadrant you're in and what is supposed to be positive and what's supposed to be negative in that quadrant. In the next couple examples, we're going to figure out which quadrant theta lies in. So here we have all students take calculus. Cotangent is greater than 0. So cotangent goes with which trig function? It's the reciprocal of which one? Tangent. And if tangent is greater than 0, it means that it's positive. So in which two quadrants is tangent positive? The first and the third. Perfect. So I'm going to cross off the second and the fourth. Yeah. Because tangent's not positive in the sine positive one and the cosine positive. It's going to be positive in either all positive or just tangent positive. Let's look at the second piece of information. It says sine of theta is less than 0. So sine is negative. So it's not in the first quadrant, because if sine's negative, it's not in the all positive one. So what quadrant are we in? The third. So we're in the tangent positive one, so that is quadrant 3. Let's look at the next one. So we're going to start with all students take calculus. If cotangent is less than 0, cotangent goes with which trig function? Tangent is less than 0, meaning that it's negative. So it's not going to be in the third one. Which other one is it not going to be in? The first one. It's not in the all positive, and it's not in the tangent positive one. So we can cross off 1 and 3. Second piece of information says that secant is greater than 0. So secant goes with which trig function? Cosine is greater than 0 means that it's positive. In which of our two remaining quadrants is cosine positive? Quadrant 4. It's not going to be in the sine positive one. We got to be in the cosine positive. So our answer would be quadrant 4. So example 4, we're going to apply both things we did in example 1 and with the quadrants in the next example, apply it all together. So it tells us that cotangent is -4/3 and sine is greater than 0. Let's figure out which quadrant we're supposed to be in here. So we have all students take calculus. If cotangent is negative, it tells us that it's negative here. Cotangent goes with which trig function? Tangent. So in which two quadrants could tangent be negative in? It would be negative in sine or cosine. So I can cross off 1 and 3. Because it's not going to be in the tangent positive and it's not going to be in the all positive. Now our second piece of information says that sine is greater than 0. So sine is positive. Which of our two remaining quadrants is sine positive? The second one. So we're going to be in quadrant 2 here. So you can draw your triangle if you want in quadrant 2. Just know that in quadrant 2, what's going to be positive? What's positive in quadrant 2? Sine and cosecant. So I'm going to make a little note here. Sine has to be positive. Cosecant has to be positive. My other two trig functions, so cosine and secant, are going to be negative. So the only thing positive in the sine positive one is sine and its reciprocal. Everything else is going to be negative. So now let's actually find our values. So cotangent, it tells us, is -4/3. Cotangent is what over what in terms of x, y, and r? X over y, perfect. So this would be x over y. Now sometimes the question might just put the negative out front. It would say -4/3, and we're not sure where the negative's supposed to go. Does it go with the 4? Does it go with the 3? How could we find out? This is our x over y. How do we know where the negative's going to go? Look at the quadrant that it's in. We go to the left, so our x-axis goes to the left. What does that mean? X is negative. Perfect. So since we're going to the left, our x is going to be -4. We go up, so our y is going to be +3. Now we're missing the hypotenuse, our radius, or r. How can we find r? Pythagorean theorem. So 3 squared plus -4 squared equals r squared. So 9 plus 16 equals r squared. 25 equals r squared. So r equals 5. Is r going to be +5 or -5? How do we know that it's positive? R is always positive. So r is 5. So now that I have x, y, and r, I can just find the rest of my trig functions. So sine is what over what? Y over r, so it'd be 3/5, perfect. And we know that it's going to be positive, so +3/5. Cosine is what over what? X over r, which would be -4/5. And we said that it was going to be negative, which we have a negative number there, so we're good. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so we can just flip cosine. That would be 5/-4. We said it was going to be negative, so we're good there. Cosecant's the reciprocal of sine, so that would be 5/3. And we said it was going to be positive, so we're good there. So knowing what quadrant it's in and knowing what signs will really help you, especially when you have something that's negative in the beginning, to figure out where your negative is going to go. Does it go with the numerator? Does it go with the denominator? But it also just helps you check your answer at the end. If your signs were off, you know that something was off in your work, so just check your work again. So let's do this example. I'll call it example 5. So we have tangent of theta equals 1/5, and cosecant is less than 0. So let's figure out what quadrant we're in. We have all students take calculus. If tangent is positive, because tangent's positive 1/5, which two quadrants could we be in? First and third. So I'm going to cross off the second and the fourth. We're either going to be in the first and all positive or just tangent positive. If cosecant is less than 0, that means that cosecant's negative. It can't be the first. So we're going to be in quadrant 3. So you can draw your triangle. Remember, it always goes towards the x-axis. So my triangle is going to go here, and my theta would be from the center. Now, in terms of x, y, and r, tangent is what over what? Y over x. So 1 is going to be our y, and 5 is going to be our x. But looking at where we drew the triangle, if I go to the left, what does that mean my x has to be? Negative. So what do we think our x is here? -5. And if we go down, what does our y have to be? -1. Perfect. It also has to be negative. The tangent doesn't really try to trick you, I wouldn't say, but it's got those negatives hidden in it. Because if we make our proportion, if we set up our fraction here, if we had -1 over -5, it turns to positive. So the negatives are hidden in this. So we know that x is going to be -5 and y is going to be -1. How do we find r? Pythagorean theorem. So we could say -5 squared plus -1 squared equals r squared. So 25 plus 1 equals r squared. 26 equals r squared. Take the square root. R equals square root 26. Can we simplify this? No, it doesn't simplify, but always ask yourself, can you simplify more? Let's find our remaining trig functions now. So we have sine of theta, cosine theta. Tangent was given, but let's find our reciprocal ones. We have cosecant theta, secant theta, and then cotangent. So sine, in terms of x, y, and r, is what over what? Y over r. So our y is -1 over square root 26. Can we leave our answer like this? No, we got to rationalize. At this point, you guys should be professionals at rationalizing. So we get negative square root 26 over 26. Cosine is going to be x over r. So our x is -5 over square root 26. We got to rationalize again here. So we get -5 square root 26 over 26. Cosecant is r over y. It's going to be the reciprocal of sine, so we can just flip it. It would be square root 26 over -1. How would I simplify my answer here? Negative square root 26. Secant is going to be the reciprocal of cosine, so r over x. So that would be square root 26 over -5. And then cotangent's the reciprocal of tangent, which would be 5 over 1. We just flip tangent. So 5 over 1 would simplify to 5. Now, if you want to just check your signs, just be super sure with your answer, make that the last thing you do in every question. Double check your signs. We are in the third quadrant, which means tangent and its reciprocal should be the only things positive. Everything else should be negative. So sine we said is negative, cosine is negative, their reciprocals are negative, and then cotangent's positive. So these are our answers. Any questions here?